Hello and welcome to Driver's Therapy. In today's video, we're going to be installing this Honda S2000 push start button on our Acura NSX. We're actually replacing this button where the cigarette lighter goes in the car, and we're going to be relocating that adapter somewhere else. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first step we're going to do is we're going to be removing two panels. We're going to be removing this panel right here, and behind that is a flat sheet metal panel held up by some bolts. Once we're able to remove that, we'll have access to the ignition switch harness so we could put on our harness for our S2000 push start button. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're removing this panel, and this is notorious on the NSX that the tabs on this breaks and it just usually needs to be replaced. It just comes with age. So one side's already kind of broken on mine and it's held up by kind of a little putty, but one side is good, so we're just going to make sure that we take this off without hurting anything else. We have our first panel off. So now we're going to be removing this other panel, this metallic sheet metal one. It's held on by some screw bolts. So let's go ahead and remove those. And we have two more on this side. Before we could take off the second panel, we have to move this little trim on here, and it's held on by two screws. So let's go ahead and do that. And at this time, now we could access the last two screws to the second panel. And our second panel is off. And before we remove the ignition harness, what we're going to be doing is we're going to actually get access to the location where we want to install the switch, just so we can make sure that we get to that before we demobilize the car. I removed this panel from the floor of the glove box, and there's 4 screws in here, and I'm going to remove those. And their glove box is out. Next, I'm going to remove the shift knob. I'm going to go ahead and take off the collar from it and turn it to remove it. Next, we're going to remove this screw from our trim. And then after that, we're going to come over here to our ashtray. We're going to pull up on it, take out this first part, and we're going to take out the screws from the ashtray.
One, two, and I have both. And now we're going to be removing the clock trim. Then we're going to unplug its connector. So after removing the clock, inside there you're going to see 2 screws. Go ahead and remove those.
Now we're going to remove the vent. And at this point, we're going to be removing the screws to the trim so we could take off the trim. And now we're going to remove the trim.
There's a couple connectors here we have to take off, but that's not a big deal. We could do that. one connector is off. And the second connector is off. And I believe we could remove it. And here it is, guys. The console trim is off.
So one of the things you need to do is you need to disassemble the cigarette lighter if we're going to be putting the start switch inside here. So let's go ahead and do that. So one of the first things you want to do is remove the light, these little bulbs, and there's going to be two of them. There's one right here and then one over here for the ashtray. And then we're going to remove this grounding connector. And at this point in time, there's this connector for the power side of the cigarette lighter, and you want to gently pry on these tabs. As a matter of fact, I think it's easier to unscrew this. Everything kind of comes apart like that, and then we can get to this a little bit easier. When you open that up, we just put this aside, and carefully, this is actually just connected on the back side of the connector. We're going to go ahead and just pull down on this, and that comes off like that. And we're going to go ahead and take this casing off and this retainer, and then we could slide this down from the bottom. Now we have our pieces. We have the little clip here, retaining clip, our light, a plastic part, and then our cigarette lighter adapter. At this point, we're going to need this harness, so we're going to have to remove this harness. And let me just go get a tool real quick. Oh, actually I was able to take it off like that. Now, if you look right here, the start switch barely doesn't fit. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure this. And the reason why I want that measurement is because we're going to relocate this somewhere else. But we also want to make sure that we, once we have that measurement, we're going to do slight cuts in order for us to put this in here. We don't want this loose, so we're going to just use a Dremel. And we're going to just make slight cuts so this goes in here snugly. So our Honda S2000 push start switch, if you look over here, it's got a flat side up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this against the plastic molding on the trim here. And on the flat side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the dots where I need it to, so I could take off a little bit of the material so it fits. All right. And now we're going to make our cut. We made the appropriate cuts and the switch slides in there, and we'll adjust it here in a bit, but as long as it's in there and it's tight, I think we're off to a good start. We're now going to be drilling the hole in the compartment box for our cigarette lighter relocation, and in theory we should be able to open this up and plug in whatever we need to plug in right here. So what we're using is a 25mm circle adapter drill bit, and it's close. It's actually smaller than this, so we might have to widen the hole a tiny bit, but it's better to start off smaller than larger. So let's go ahead and do that. And we have our hole. Our next step is we're going to take the harness to the cigarette lighter and the ashtray bulbs here, and we're going to extend it about anywhere from 12 inches to 17 inches. I went with a little bit over 17 inches, and what that's going to do is going to allow us to run our new cigarette lighter adapter to the compartment box. Okay, so we have the harness complete. As you could tell, we extended it so we could be able to reach this relocated cigarette lighter. I know a lot of you guys are not going to be happy with this part, but it is part of the process, and we have to remove this tab in order for us to be able to put the compartment back in. And I know it's going to be a turn off, but I really don't think it's going to be a big deal at the end of the day, so I'm just doing it. So this is the custom harness for the S2000 push button, and this is the area, this is the splice area where we're going to put it in ignition switch harness. This is a relay. This goes to the actual button itself, and this is to be grounded. All right, let's go ahead and put this in the ignition switch harness circuit. Looking through the ignition switch, if you look up, you see that brown connector there? That's the ignition switch, and that's where we're going to be removing that harness part. And now we're going to connect this harness until it clicks, and then I'm going to connect this up where the original one went. So I have the harness zip tied to that metal part up there, and that's where this plastic part goes, but we'll make both of them work together. And then I took the relay behind the carpet and I snaked the connector for the S2000 button through there with the grounding cable as well. In order for us to properly get the S2000 button harness through here, there's not a lot of room to get to it, so I'm gonna unscrew these two components so I could get back there and get that harness through. So here's the connector for the S2000 push start button, and I'm just gonna start snaking it through. And now we have to get the ground cable. And we have the ground cable. So I've attached the ground to one of the grounding points that was for the radio, or something else is grounded here. So I added the ground to this bolt, and we're going to go ahead and tighten down the radio and the AC control unit. Okay, now it's time for us to put this compartment back in and hook up our relocated cigarette lighter. All right, so let's go ahead and place this in here. And now comes the fun part. Okay, so let's see if our measurements worked out. So far, look at that, guys. Oh man, that is awesome. Okay, we're gonna start putting all of this together and locking it all down. And I think that's pretty good so far. And then at this point, we're going to go ahead and start connecting our harness to it. So over here is the first connector, and we're going to go ahead and connect that. And then I'm going to take my time here and I'm going to make sure that we navigate these wires correctly so they don't get caught on anything. And I'm going to connect this to the cigarette lighter. I'll do that and show you the finished product. So we have the OEM cigarette lighter relocated, and at this point in time we're going to test it out. So let's go ahead and, as you can tell, the phone is not charging. And the phone is charging now. So we know that the relocation works, and what I personally like about this is that you could charge your phone and it could be out of the way of driving. So I think that's pretty cool. All right, at this point in time, we're gonna patch everything up. We're gonna put the button in there and everything and give it a test. Okay, I wanna be real honest with everyone here. There was a little bit of a hiccup as far as the compartment box going in, because this piece goes in first and then the glove box goes. But since we relocated the cigarette lighter, we really couldn't do that. So what I did here is I managed to make everything work. And the way I did that was I had to remove the top of the compartment box. It's a few screws. I know you guys are going to be like, oh no, but it's not that bad. Now it seems like a lot of modification, but for me it was some trial and error, and really it does take some patience, so be patient with it. Now let me show you how this is going to work. It's actually going to be the opposite from how you do it originally. So the glove box is in there. It's in there first because of the cigarette lighter. We've got this bracket locked down and we have the top off still. At this point in time, we're going to grab our unit. It's got the push start button in there already, and we're going to navigate it through, and we're going to start connecting the connectors. I'm going to do the light first here. And then after that, I'm going to gently reach over and connect this connector to the ambient temperature sensor. Everything is a little tight. I'm trying not to scratch the face of the radio here. So let's see if we could do this gently. Then I'm going to put this connector back in there. At this point in time, everything's connected, and we're going to hook up the connector to the start switch itself. Okay, there we go. And then this is the part that, in order for it to work, this is essentially how we have to do it. So as you saw, we cut this off, and really in order for this setup to work, you do have to cut this off. I know how you guys are going to feel about it, but at this point in time, I'm committed. I've got this button set up already. I've got the cigarette lighter relocated, and really the most major part is this part right here. So the way I did it, and you just want to be a little careful, is you just push it in and it goes down. And the reason why you could do that is because of the tab. Now you're probably wondering, oh no, it's going to be loose, but because we put that bracket back and we made these holes, and once we put the 4 screws on the glove box and the top of it, it's going to be just as sturdy as it was before. Now one of the last things you want to do is you want to push your engine start button down correctly the way you want it. And at least did check, I didn't have it correctly the first time, but you want to make sure this closes, and that does. And the button feels sturdy. So at this point in time, I'm going to put everything back together and we're going to test it.